Good evening, my dear friends. I hope you're all doing very well. Tonight we're going to be learning chapter 4 in the laws of blessings in the Rambam. We're going to be learning how the blessings over food work. Meaning, Rambam begins off by telling us that when a person makes the blessing after food, grace after meals, whether it's the long version, whether it's the short version, they should always be doing it when they are sitting down. In other words, when we're coming to thank God for our food, we shouldn't be one foot out of the door, but rather we should be sitting and doing it while we think what we are saying. Now, if a person forgot to say the grace after meal, so then wherever he will be when he remembers, he should do it in that spot. If he did it purposely, though, the Rambam says, he should go back. And even if a person is standing or walking, at that point they should sit down and do it. Although if they didn't sit down, it is still counted and it's fine. And in general, the way the blessing should be done is in the place where you ate. When you finish, you're sitting down, make the blessing over there. Now, if a person is not sure if they made the blessing before they ate, in other words, the blessing after eating, so then you should do it. If you're not sure, you should still do it because it's a very important mitzvah. It's a mitzvah in the Torah. It's biblical. But if the blessing is before food, since it is only it was instituted by the rabbis that we should bless God before we eat. We should thank God for the food that He is giving us. If a person is not sure if he did it, so then he should not go back and say it because we don't want to say God's name in vain. Now, if a person knows for a fact that they forgot to say the blessing, they didn't say it, and now they're in the middle of the meal and they remember, oh my God, I didn't say the blessing before the food. So then, in such a case, they should say the blessing right there and then and continue eating. Now, if a person is eating in one room and now they go to a different room or to a different house, they move out. They go to eat somewhere else. They continue their dinner in their friend's house. So, it depends. If they had it in mind when they started eating, and it's on bread, so they're in the middle of a full-on meal, so then they can continue eating over there without making a new blessing. But if they did not have them in mind, they were just starting to eat at home, and then someone came and called them out, hey, you want to go to the bar with me? So then they would have to make a new blessing. Now, that all is applicable to bread. If it is just either liquid or another blessing, which is not the blessing of bread, it's not a full, real dinner, which is based off bread, so then in any case, they would always have to make a new blessing. So they should finish off, make the grace after meal where they are, then they leave, and they'll make a new blessing in the place where they come. And this will also apply in regards to if you're sitting down to dinner, and then, for whatever reason, everyone has to pick up and go outside for some time. Let's say, the Rambam says in a case where you have either a funeral passing by, or the Rambam says in a case where you have a groom and bride, which are getting married, and the procession is going by. So then, it's a very special joy, so you go outside to go in and congratulate them. So everyone goes outside. When you come back, if there was no one left at the table, you have to make a new blessing. Because you put your whole dinner on pause. But if there was someone, maybe someone who was not feeling so well, or someone who was older, who was still at the table and didn't go out, for whatever reason, so then it's okay because someone was actively in the dinner in the middle of the meal, even while the other people left. But if a person is inside the house, so you're just going from one room to the other corner of the room. So you're moving, you're going from the couch to the table and so on. In such a case, you don't have to make a blessing. Although the Rambam says an interesting thing that in regards to a very large tree, if a person is sitting on one side of the tree, he says if you have like a big fig tree, and you're eating on one side of the tree, and then you go and eat on the other side of the tree, once you got to the other side of the tree, you should make another blessing because it's so, I guess you can't see one from the other. So now we're going to talk about an interesting law in regards to a person who makes the blessing on bread. So let's say it's Shabbat. A person will wash their hands and now make the hamotzi, the blessing, before the bread, and starts eating the challah, the bread. Now you have other foods that are being served. You have fish, you have meat, you have salads, and so on. The law is that because bread has such a strong value, so to speak, it's a very special food, so therefore when you make the blessing over the bread, it will actually include everything within it. So in other words, you're making a blessing on the entire dinner, actually. And therefore, any foods that will be served throughout this dinner, you have in mind that they are part of the dinner, and then you're just going to be included in that original blessing. That is all in regards to food during dinner. But dessert, which is served afterwards, you're going to have to make a special blessing for. So even on Shabbat, if you eat and you make the blessing of hamotzi, the blessing over the bread, and you eat the whole dinner, and when it comes to the end of the dinner, you come to dessert, even if you didn't do the grace after meals yet, when you come to dessert, you have to make a new blessing. It's an interesting thing. And similarly, in regards, if the person is sitting down to dinner and is eating a cooked grain, something which is of substantial food, and then you have some other cooked foods that come along with it, if you make the blessing over the cooked grain, then it would include the other cooked foods. But if you make the blessing on the salad, it would not include the bread, because the bread is more important than the salad, according to Jewish law at least. Now, if a person has been eating dinner, and then a person decides, you know what, I'm finished, I'm full, or whatever, decide that they're finished dinner. Now, even if the person has not gotten up to leave the room, they're still sitting in their place, and then, they decide, actually, one last bite. If they already had decided they're going to stop eating, and now they want to take another bite, they should make another blessing. But if a person didn't actually decide to stop eating, they're just sitting there at the table, and they get carried away in conversation, even if it's the whole day long, they're still sitting at the table with their, it's still part of that original dinner, and they do not have to make another blessing. And in regards to drinking wine, a person who makes the blessing over wine before dinner would usually have to make another blessing if they're going to be eating it during their meal. Except on Shabbat, because on Shabbat when we drink the wine, we're having in mind that we're also going to make some l'chaim in the middle of the dinner and so on. And even if a person makes a blessing over, let's say, one type of wine at a certain part of the meal, and then they bring out another bottle of wine, which is a different type of wine. If it was red wine, now it's white wine, dry and sweet, and so on and so forth. It doesn't matter. All the wine is wine, so you don't have to make another blessing. Although, the Rambam says in certain scenarios, you can make a blessing where there's a special blessing over a very special product, a good food, a good wine. You will make the blessing thanking God who is good and does good. Now the Rambam continues off by saying a very fundamental thing which we have to know. A person should not make the blessing over food until the food is actually in front of them. So in other words, you can't make the blessing and the food still hasn't been served. So once the food is in front of you, then you can make the blessing and eat it, because we should make the blessing as close as possible to the actual consumption of the food. Now here's an interesting law according to this. What if a person is drinking from a water fountain? So turns on the water fountain and the water is spritzing out. Now the water that you're saying the blessing on is long gone down the drain. You're only going to be drinking the water that's going to come later on. So Rambam says it's okay, because since you have in mind this is what's going to happen, it's okay. So that's an interesting thing. And the Rambam says that in regards to wine, when we're talking about the holiday and so on, Shabbat and so on and so forth, when everyone's drinking the wine, so then whenever we make the blessing during the meal, so if it's before the meal we're making Kiddush, so then everyone's going, one person can make Kiddush for everyone and everyone can answer Amen and drink the wine. But if it's not in the beginning of the meal, but rather it's in the middle of the meal, so then every person should make a blessing for themselves over their wine, because, he says a very interesting reason, because people are in the middle of eating and they're going to be answering Amen, it could be dangerous. Because we don't want that someone might, God forbid, choke over their food. So therefore, the law says, when you say the blessing, it does not include, it's not going to include everyone, and therefore you have to make the blessing on your own. So, that's the chapter of Rambam for today. We're going to be continuing to learning a little bit more about the laws of blessings over the next couple of days. Very fascinating, very practical. Over here we learned all about the various ways during our meals when we have to make the blessings, when we might be exempt from doing the blessings, depending on the scenario, as we've learned today. So we'll see you guys tomorrow. Have a very good one.